Okay, it's Mayor John Biggs here, and can I welcome you all here this evening for this event. So what we've done as a council is to convene an event to talk about the vaccine programme, to maybe address some of the concerns and anxieties people have about vaccination, to share some information about the progress we're making in Tower Hamlets, to talk about some of the challenges we're facing in terms of getting people in a place where they're confident to respond to the call and be vaccinated. We've been going through a really dangerous period in Tower Hamlets and across London, of course, the country, with the pandemic, and it has caused a lot of harm and remains very, very dangerous. As I think our Public Health Director, Somen, Banerjee, and our London Public Health Director, Fenton, will be telling you in a minute, things are beginning to move in a slope towards being better, but it's still a very precarious time. And so what we've been doing, so I'm the Mayor of Tower Hamlets, and the council, in terms of the headlines, we're in a supporting position to the NHS, who are doing vaccination and testing and looking after people when they fall ill. I think the panel this evening is Dr. Somen Banerjee, our Director of Public Health, myself, Councillor Rachel Blake, who's my lead member on the Council for Adults' Health and Wellbeing, Dr. Anwar, who's a local GP in Tower Hamlets, Professor Fenton, Regional Director for London for Public Health England, and I think we're having trouble getting into this meeting someone from our wider health service who can talk about the way they're organising other aspects of the vaccination campaign, but I think we can cover for that if she's not able to join us. So as I've said, this evening's meeting is about reassuring people, about sharing information, about perhaps giving the bigger picture, and about perhaps talking about some of the partnership work we've been doing to keep people safe. So I just finished by saying that obviously we've been working hard at the town hall. The health service has been working fantastically hard, our GPs, many other people in our community, in our schools, our care workers, but of course you as well, if you're an ordinary member of the public, because by behaving in the right ways and keeping each other safe, reinforcing those messages, they're in many ways the most important part of the process of trying to tackle and keep under control this virus. I'll now hand over to, I think, Rachel Blake, who is presenting us this evening, and she'll introduce the other speakers and manage the questions. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you, John. I'd like to really welcome everybody who's listening in this evening, and also to our panel. We've got a really wide range of expertise, and we're going to be starting this evening with Dr. Somen Banerjee, our tireless Director for Public Health, who's going to be taking us through some of the basic information about our vaccine programme. Thanks, Somen.
Thanks very much, Rachel, and thanks everyone for joining, and thanks for your time today. As Rachel was saying, I'm going to say a little bit about the programme in Tower Hamlets so far. Apologies, I'm just trying to, thank you. So just to kind of talk about where we're at now and where we want to be. So overall, there's 280,000 of us in the borough who are eligible for vaccination. Our first vaccination clinic in Tower Hamlets was actually on the 16th of December last year. And since then, 28,000 of us have received at least the first dose of the vaccine. And those are the people who are most vulnerable to the impacts of COVID infection. So it's residents in care homes and their carers, it's the over 70s, it's people with severe health conditions, the people who've actually been shielding through the pandemic, and it's health and care workers. Where we're at now is that we're vaccinating the 65 to 69-year-olds and also people with health conditions which may be mild and moderate. By the end of May, we want to have vaccinated all the over 50s, and this will cover about 99% of those groups who've actually suffered most from COVID to date. And then by the end of autumn, we want to have vaccinated all those who are eligible. So that's the 280,000 in the borough who are eligible. So what have we learned so far? So if we look at the over 70s at this point, 7 out of 10 have received their first dose, and that's great. We've looked at differences between different groups in Tower Hamlets, and we see differences. So 80% of the white population have been vaccinated, 69% of South Asians, and 50% of Black communities, Black populations in Tower Hamlets. And then if you look across the borough, the levels of uptake vary quite a bit, from about 50% to 90%. And when we work with communities and get insights, the reasons for not taking up the vaccine there's a range of reasons. People are worried about what is in the vaccine, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. People are worried about the safety of the vaccine, the speed with which the vaccine has come online. But some people want to get the vaccine. They're not necessarily sure how to get the vaccine. They're not sure whether they've been invited. They want the vaccine, but they may be struggling to get to the vaccination site. So those are some of the reasons why people are not taking it up at the moment. And then why is this so important? And it's fairly straightforward. Vaccinations save lives and reduce suffering. Since this began, we've had 28,000 known cases of COVID. We've had 460 deaths, tragically, and we've all felt the impact of COVID on our lives. We know the vaccines we are using, we know they're safe and effective. And if we get really great coverage, over 90%, the benefits to our borough and to our quality of life will be immense. So I'm just going to finish off just in terms of some of the key messages. So if you've been offered the vaccine, please take up the offer. And if you think you should have been offered the vaccine, particularly after the discussions today, please contact your GP or contact our helpline, which is on the details of which are on our council website. If you're not yet eligible, please be ready to take the vaccine when it is offered to you. This is about protecting yourself, it's protecting your families, it's protecting your loved ones, and it's about a safe Tower Hamlets for all of us, so we can continue and go on to enjoy our lives in the way we were before this all began. So I'm going to stop there, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Somen, and thank you for sharing us the progress so far, but clearly we do still have a long way to go with the programme, and that's part of why we're here this evening, to talk to everybody and hear questions from people about what they want to hear. So we've had a huge number of questions submitted in advance, for which we're really grateful. They're covering a series of 3 main themes, really: the safety of the vaccine, the rollout, and how effective it is. So the first question is actually for Somen. It is the vaccine safe?
Thanks very much, Rachel. So I think I just want to start by talking about how vaccines actually come onto the market, and actually the rigorous trials that they go through to ensure that they're safe. So vaccines, there's three phases initially. So the initial safety trials with a small number of people. Then they're tried out with a larger number of people in different groups to see how they affect different groups within the population: older people, adults and children. And then the vaccines are trialed on thousands of people to see what their impacts are, and to ensure that they're safe. They are then regulated through what's called the Medicines and Healthcare Regulatory Authority, who review all the evidence and make sure that it's a safe vaccine. But I think one of the things to be to really take on board here is that the vaccination programme has now vaccinated around 16 million people across the country. And what we're observing, because the side effects are monitored every day, is that the side effects are in line with what we were expecting from the research, which shows that the vaccine is safe. It does have a few side effects, which we'll talk about later, but it is a safe vaccine, both the Pfizer vaccine and the AstraZeneca vaccine. And when other vaccines may come on board, they will have gone through the same process.
Great. Thank you. We've got another series of questions that are coming up, and I'm going to ask Dr. Anwar Ali to come in. You just mentioned side effects, Somen. So, Dr. Anwar Ali.
So, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, so side effects that are, there are a few side effects with the COVID-19 vaccine. Most of them are quite mild and last a week. So the common side effect that most people are having is a fever, a headache, aches and pains, feeling a bit nauseated. Those can, as I said, can last a week, and you can take paracetamol. We haven't seen anyone report any other serious side effects.
Thank you. Thanks, Anwar. Can I stay with you, Anwar, for a minute? There's a question about what are the ingredients in the vaccine. People are worried about the vaccine containing animal products.
Okay, so the 3 approved vaccines for COVID-19, which is the Pfizer, BioNTech, AstraZeneca, and the Moderna, which isn't in play as yet, does not contain any animal products or egg. And it has been, the 3 vaccines have been endorsed by the British Islamic Society, the Church of England, and many Jewish leaders. For example, last weekend, one of our vaccine centres, which is the Cable Street Centre, in collaboration with the East London Mosque, hosted a pop-up clinic at the London Muslim Centre, which was very popular with residents in Tower Hamlets. So the key take-home message is, listen to the experts, what we're saying, rather than any information and misinformation that you're receiving through WhatsApps, through social media.
Thanks, Anwar. Really important messages there about where to get trusted information, because I think that's such an important part of how we're encouraging people to take up the vaccine. So we've got a question about the progress to date and what the timeline is. We heard a bit about it from Somen, but can I ask vaccination about the progress in the borough? Which groups have been vaccinated to date, and what is the timeline for rolling the vaccine out to others? Tracy, can you give us a bit more information about that?
I think because Tracy can't get into the call, maybe Somen should answer that.
Sorry, we still don't have Tracy. Okay, Somen, could you recap on those bits?
Yes, yeah, thanks very much. So currently we're in what's called phase 1 of the vaccine rollout. And as I was saying previously, that's the 50, it's the 50 plus and people who have underlying health conditions. So that's the phase that we're in, and that covers 99% of those who have suffered severe illness or death as a result of COVID. Where we are in that process currently is so far we've vaccinated the really top priorities, which have been residents of care homes and their carers, the 80 plus population, health and care workers, and that we then moved on to the 70 to 79. And then just this weekend, it's been the milestone has been all the 70 plus. and the groups that I've mentioned. Where we're at currently is the focus is on the 65 to 69-year-olds and people with underlying health conditions. So, for instance, heart disease, diabetes, lung disease, those sorts of conditions. So that's where, so people will be getting invites. They may get a national letter, but they will also get invites from their general practice. So that is the focus from now until over the next month or so, and then we are moving on to the 50 plus populations, which will take us to around May. Following that, the programme will open up to the rest of the population, and so the aim is by the end of autumn, we should have vaccinated the whole population. Rachel, I think it might be helpful just to bring in Kevin because he's got the national picture and he may have a little bit more to add.
Thanks. Yes, really welcome Kevin now.
Great, thank you, Councillor Blake. So I think the progress which has been made on the vaccination nationally is truly remarkable. More than 16 million people have now received the vaccine in those top cohorts that Somen spoke about earlier. And it's really important that this age group, especially those aged over 65 years and older who are receiving the vaccines now and in the next cohort, because this is where we see most of the severe disease and death from COVID. Now, it's perhaps too soon to see the impact of the vaccination on reducing death rates and reducing hospital admissions. And of course, we're in the middle of a national lockdown. But given the experience of other countries, such as Israel, which have scaled up vaccines in their most vulnerable populations, we can really expect to see a reduction in hospital admissions, as well as a reduction in deaths in the weeks ahead. And that is really a good sign for us to begin to really control the pandemic and the really devastating impact it's had, especially on our older citizens in Tower Hamlets, across the city and across the country.
Thank you, Kevin. That's really good to hear about the national picture. I wanted to ask as well, a question that's coming up is about whether people who have recovered from COVID-19 still need to take the vaccine and why.
So absolutely. One of the things we're learning is just how powerful these vaccines are. And in fact, the immune response that's generated by the vaccine tends to be stronger, and it tends to last longer than if you were infected naturally. And of course, nobody wants to get COVID naturally at all because of the side effects of COVID. If you're older, and certainly for some Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities, we tend to have higher rates of severe disease and death. So you really want to avoid sort of natural infection if you can. So the vaccine is both safe, it is effective, it gives a very strong immune response, which means that you're going to be protected longer and stronger with a vaccine versus natural infection.
Thank you. And can I just stay with you for a minute, Kevin, and ask, we've got some questions about how safe is it to delay the second dose?
Yes, so, you know, one of the things that we've had to do with the development of this vaccine is that we've moved very quickly and safely from testing in the trials that we discussed earlier into delivering the vaccines. Now, the ways the manufacturer approved the vaccines had a particular time period between the first and second dose. But we know from many other vaccines that actually you can lengthen the time between two doses. And in fact, for many vaccines, especially vaccines against viruses, the longer you delay the second dose is the stronger the reaction, because your body has even more time to develop its own natural immunity. So the United Kingdom was first off the block with recommending that we delay the second dose for up to 12 weeks. Other countries are now coming on board and saying, actually, you can delay it. And of course, the WHO has also said, the World Health Organization said, you can delay the second dose. And just to ensure that not only are we doing this, but are confident about it, there are now a range of studies and evaluations which are being done to really just confirm the power of delaying it a little bit further so that we can both generate more immunity and have a stronger response. And then finally, remember, because we really wanted to get on top of the vaccine, we wanted to ensure as many people at risk got their first dose, and we've been able to achieve it in London and of course in Tower Hamlets as well.
Excellent, thank you. Another question about safety, and this is the vaccine safe to take during pregnancy and when breastfeeding? Does it have any effect on fertility? And Wara, can you come back to us on that, please?
Yes, so there is no evidence to show that the vaccine is not safe in pregnancy. However, we do need more evidence before we can offer it routinely to all pregnant women. The JCVI, the Joint Committee for Immunisation and Vaccine, has updated their advice. And if you are a health or social care worker, i.e., your workplace puts you in a dangerous position, or you have a serious underlying condition, then you may have the vaccine. With regards to breastfeeding, it's safe in breastfeeding. Fertility is the other question that we get commonly asked. There's no data to show in animal studies that the COVID-19 vaccines affect fertility. So you can have the vaccine and you don't need to delay your pregnancy. It is not a live vaccine, so it will not infect you or your baby.
Thank you. We've got some questions about how we're addressing the disparity in take-up. So, John, what's being done to encourage Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities to take the vaccine?
Well, that's a really important question, and indeed, not just in Tower Hamlets, but across London, we've been talking about it really regularly because it is a persistent problem. Not only are the take-up levels a bit lower, but the vulnerabilities of the communities, for a range of reasons, including overcrowding, multi-generational households, the sort of jobs people do, face-to-face jobs, if you like, mean that communities are more vulnerable. So on the face of it, rationally, people should be rushing to get their vaccine. But I think there's a number of things. So community in different places feels a little bruised, a little out of the loop. People don't necessarily rely on the same mainstream media. There's information issues about safety. There's an issue about faith communities and whether the vaccine is safe and appropriate, and so I think a range of faith leaders across all major faiths have come out and said, look, this is pretty straightforward. We've had vaccinations at the East London Mosque, and we've used other faith settings and religious leaders supporting it. There's a number of urban myths about the vaccine, and I guess using the media, using the community media, word of mouth, using community leaders who are recognised, so elders in communities and so on through the media is quite important. Also outreach. In some boroughs, people have been using buses, vaccination buses to visit housing estates, and we'd like to look at doing that in the East End, although we're not quite as spread out as some of the outer London boroughs. But I guess the fundamental thing is about getting the message across about it being really important, not just for you may not worry about yourself, but for your family, for the community, and for everyone else. If we can't get the vaccination levels up to a very high level, then we all remain more vulnerable. So it's an ongoing task, but people like me can do it, but we need people like you watching this to get that confidence out there and do it. Nothing better, I guess, than someone who just had the vaccination going out to someone and saying, hey, I had it and my leg hasn't fallen off or whatever, because it's pretty straightforward stuff. A no-brainer, as I would say, but it's easy to say that. People need to be reassured.
Thank you. We're definitely hearing about the power of a message from a friend or a family who's had the vaccine and going out and telling their friends or family. So if anyone's listening and they've had the vaccine, please tell your friends and family. And if everybody's had it, told 5 people, and then it spread like that, that would be great. So the next question, I think Tracy still hasn't quite joined us yet. So I'm going to ask about whether unpaid carers, or when will unpaid carers receive the vaccine? And Somen, can you come in on that?
Apologies, Rachel, I was having problems coming off mute. So unpaid carers are in what's called category 6 for prioritisation. Therefore, they are currently eligible for vaccination, and that's just come on board now. So if you're an unpaid carer or someone in your household is an unpaid carer, they should be getting invited for a vaccination, and if not, they can contact our helpline or contact their GP practice, but they are in the current category.
So unpaid carers in the current category, and wait for the call now, or wait for the call for another few days, or phone our helpline now, Somen?
Obviously, Tracy will be best to answer that, but those invites, they should have been invited already. So I think that, you know, if you're uncertain, contact our helpline.
Brilliant.
I think that would be good.
Thank you. Okay.
Add to that, Rachel. So we have a WhatsApp group, so unpaid carers have been invited, but obviously if you've been left off, then please contact your GP surgery and we will make those arrangements for you to have your vaccine.
Thank you, Anwar. That's a really important update. I'm often contacted by unpaid carers who have been really waiting for this moment, so that's really welcome news. Great. So the next question is about the vaccine. So the question is, which vaccine is better, Pfizer or AstraZeneca? For Somen, please.
Thanks very much, Rachel. So Pfizer, AstraZeneca, they're both effective, they're both safe. The most important thing is to make sure that, you know, if you get, it's make sure you get both doses of the vaccine. So if you have 2 doses of either the Pfizer or the AstraZeneca, the evidence shows you have about 90% protection. And I think when you do get invited, depending on what the vaccination centre has received at that time, so they are getting, some days they're getting AstraZeneca, sometimes they're getting Pfizer, they've got different storage, but they're both equally effective, and so when you do get to the vaccination centre, it's important just to get vaccinated, please. So yeah, equally effective.
Okay, thank you. I've got a question now for Kevin about whether the vaccine protects against new variants, and are the Kent and Bristol variants in Tower Hamlets, Kevin?
So that's such a great question, and I know that this is of great concern to all of us, especially with news reports which highlight that the South African variant, for example, may be there may be vaccines which may be less effective against the South African variant. And so the importance here is that we are continuing to look for these variants in our city and across the country. We have what we call strong surveillance systems now, which are looking at people who are diagnosed positive to see if we can find the variants. Thankfully, the numbers in London are very, very, very low. But that means that we need to keep our vigilance, because what we don't want to do is to have these variants be introduced into the country and spread, and therefore affect the effectiveness of the vaccine. So at the moment, all of the vaccines which are currently available in England and which are being used in London and in Tower Hamlets are going to be effective against the most common strains which are circulating now. It would have been both the wild type strain that we had for the first wave, as well as the variant that was first described in Kent, which resulted in much of the second wave that we saw. So a bit of detail there, but the takeaway message is the vaccines that we have now are very effective against the strains which are circulating. We are vigilant, looking for new strains, and just to keep those strains down, we must adhere to the rules in the lockdown, staying at home, protecting ourselves from through prevention, and of course, taking the vaccine when it becomes available. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you, Kevin. And a question for Somen or Anwar. Can I choose which vaccine to have? Somen. Start with Somen and then Anwar. And Wara, can you come in? We can't get Somen.
Okay, I think given the efficacy and the safety of both the vaccines that are on offer, which is the Pfizer, BioNTech and AstraZeneca, I don't really see that there is much choice clinically. My advice to every single resident in Tower Hamlets and everywhere in the country is actually, when you're offered, take the vaccine. The sooner you have the vaccine, the sooner you are safer, you are protected, others are protected, you're helping your NHS, you're helping your country. So I don't think really, there is a choice. Just take the vaccine.
Thank you, Anwar. And the next one I have is back to Kevin. Does the vaccine stop people getting COVID-19, and is there still a risk of catching the virus when vaccinated?
Right, so the virus is very effective in preventing severe disease and also preventing death from COVID, and that's where the real effectiveness of the vaccine is concerned. Now, there is a possibility that even after vaccinated, you could be exposed to the virus, still carry the virus, and then infect others, even although you may not be infected or affected by that virus because you're immune protected. But what we are now seeing from the research studies is that the vaccines not only protect yourself, but are increasingly shown to reduce transmission to others. So that's really good news. The benefit of vaccination is not just only to protect yourself, but increasingly the data is suggesting that it will reduce transmission in the community, and that's going to be a positive. And that's why a key part of what we're encouraging everybody to do is, when the vaccine is offered, to take it, because the more of us that are vaccinated, the more immunity and protection we have in our local community, and that means that our community is more resilient to the pandemic, and of course to some of the side effects and the complications of the infection. So that's really important, to take up the vaccine when available.
Thank you very much. A question's just come in. What are the benefits of vaccinating everyone in a multi-generational household at the same time? Are those living in overcrowded conditions given priority? Kevin, can you come back to us on that?
That's an excellent question. And, because we're rolling out the vaccine based upon age and vulnerabilities, it means that some of the nuances in how you would probably do a vaccination program, if you had unlimited supply of the vaccines, we're not able to do that at this stage. Now, clearly in a multi-generational household, the priority will be to protect those who are older and therefore most vulnerable. If there are carers within that household, as you've heard today, carers can now begin to access the vaccine. And then, as and when the vaccine is, younger people are eligible in the household for vaccination, then we would encourage them to take it up. The more people in that household that are vaccinated, the better protected that household is. So we're all in this together, and encouraging older family members to take the vaccine when available is important. And also, older family members have a role to play in encouraging young people to continue to practice prevention, hands, face and space, as well as to encourage others, peers, family members and colleagues to take the vaccine. We're all in this together.
Thank you for that. And I've got a question again about suitability of the vaccine. So, are vaccines suitable for people with food allergies, and are there any people it is not suitable for?
Okay. So if you had a serious, severe allergic reaction previously, anaphylactic shock, then the COVID-19 vaccine is not safe for you. However, this is a question I think each individual must ask their GP to advise them on. to see what the individual benefits and risks are. If you've had a severe reaction after having one jab of the COVID-19 vaccine, then clearly you shouldn't have a second one. Or if you are allergic to any of the particular ingredients of each of those vaccines, then you need to consult your GP, and you should have a list because you would have had an allergy test, then you can't have it. Otherwise, you are safe to have the COVID-19 vaccine.
Thank you. And this is a question for Kevin. Is the borough receiving similar amounts of vaccine as other areas? Are we behind the national average for vaccine administration? Where are we?
So we are not behind. I know that there was a lot of concern in January and the first part of February, where London's rate of vaccination and the uptake of our quota of vaccines was just a little bit behind some of the other regions in the country. And that's explained by supply issues of the vaccine for London. It's explained by the unique characteristics of our city, getting people to access services, engaging with communities who are sometimes less engaged with services. But we were able to meet our target by the deadline, and more than 1.5 million Londoners have now been vaccinated, and we are on track to move to the next cohort of individuals to get vaccinated. And that's going to be really exciting as we move down the age groups and ensure that people who had their first dose of vaccine get their second dose. And Rachel, if I could just speak about the importance of the second dose a bit, because there's a real risk that people having received the first dose are no longer as vigilant as they need to be. And we must all be clear that we need both doses of the vaccine to have the greatest effectiveness on reducing the risk of death from this disease. So you need 2 doses of vaccine to get the maximal benefit. And for all of us, whether you're in Tower Hamlets, I live just across the river, I want to ensure that we all are well protected. And so getting that second dose is important.
Thank you. Really crucial message there. We've got a question about our progress really has just come in. When approximately will all over 70s have received their second dose of vaccine, kind of connected to that? Somen, have you got an update on that? Oh no, we can't get Somen in. I'm gonna go there, Somen. I think
Oh
you can
yes,
go.
I'm there now. I'm so sorry about this. Again, if Tracy was here, and maybe Anwar may have some experience of this as well, but essentially the second doses are starting now, so that the people who've initially received the vaccination are now receiving their second doses, and that's going to continue for the next 2 months. I guess one of the things that I probably is really worth thinking about is that, as I said before, around 20% of the most vulnerable groups have not yet had their first dose. And it's really important, I think, to spread that message within the community, with sort of family and friends, that it is really important to get vaccinated, because these people are in the most vulnerable group. All the reasons that we've talking about today, safe, effective vaccination. We need to really understand, what it is, what the barriers are. We have set up our helpline. We are calling them. We're having discussions about kind of, what are the issues, and we're doing everything that we can to support people to get the vaccine, because that's just the first dose, as Kevin said. It's really important that, to get the full protection, they have both doses. So there are some people who have not yet had their first dose. So I think that's a really important message to everyone listening today, to get that message out into the community.
Yeah, thank you. We've touched on this, but I think it's worth emphasising, because another question has come in just for clarity. for you, Somen, do people who are vaccinated need to follow national guidance on social distancing and not mixing?
So absolutely. So the messages, as Kevin has said as well, those messages around hands, space and face are as important. Important to recognise it also takes time to get protection from the vaccine as well, but the key messages are the same, and until lockdown is eased. It's really important, and I think one of the things that we were discussing today with yesterday with Tracy is the importance that when people do get the vaccine, the vaccinators make sure that they get that message across, that those measures are as important as ever. So absolutely, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we've had a question, John, you visited the London Muslim Centre earlier in the week. Are there more community clinics being organised like the one that was held there? John.
Okay, so Somen lost a battle to try and eliminate the word pop-up from our dictionary, but we've had a number of pop-up clinics where, and London Muslim Centre was one of them. There have been a few others as well in community centres and halls, and we've had quite a lot of requests from community organisations. So if you have an organisation which is accessible, the NHS I think makes a decision, and it can sometimes look a bit bureaucratic, but we really want to get to where the people need the jabs if they are not coming out. Now, it may be that Somen can tell you, or indeed Kevin can tell you a bit more about the bureaucracy of this and how we can actually identify good places. But yeah, we want to get to where people need them. And what we're doing now as a borough is collecting information from the NHS, confidentially looking at who's had it where, so we can do some hotspots of where people aren't being vaccinated, and we can try and get into those communities by whatever means. It could be a bus, it could be a tenants hall, it could be something else. But I don't know whether Somen or Kevin could add to that in terms of the outreach, because we desperate to make this work in the easiest possible way for people.
Somen.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. So what I was going to say is that we now get very good, or actually really improving data from a number of sources, from the NHS and Public Health England, and that gives us a very clear idea of where within the borough we are getting areas of low uptake, and also in what groups. We've done through this COVID experience, we've really developed some really strong community networks. We've also got very strong networks with housing associations. We had a session with the voluntary sector last week, in which we talked with a number of community organisations. They are very keen to work with us in hosting community clinics. So those are not difficult to establish. So essentially within the borough, the plan is to have main vaccination sites. So those are currently Cable Street and Newby. But also where we need to strengthen and improve access, we will have what have been called pop-up clinics. We are able to target those in terms in estates, in community organisations, working with different communities, different ethnic groups as well, and that was the driver for the clinic in the LMC, and what we heard back from that was that they were very welcomed. People who might have had some concerns, some fears, were happy to go to a place where they felt comfortable, and a place that was trusted, and so that was a positive experience. What we need to do now is develop that further, and really focus that, and provide as many opportunities for people who have, who may not necessarily be taking up the vaccine through the mainstream routes to help them get the vaccine. So that's something that we're working on as a real priority at the moment.
Thank you. Can I ask about, this is something that comes up quite a bit directly actually. How are housebound residents being vaccinated, Somen?
I'm going to start that, but I think it might be Anwar who might be able to answer that more. But I know that Tracy has a roving team which goes out to housebound patients and also other settings, hostels, care home settings. But I'll pass on to Anwar because I think she might know a bit more about it.
So we've been very successful in vaccinating our housebound. Basically, each practice has our own list from NHS England, as well as we look at the patients that we know can't come out. And so I'll give you an example. So all of my patients at St. Office practice have been vaccinated. We just basically drew up teams of doctors and nurses, and one member of reception staff just drove, and we walked mainly, and we've successfully vaccinated all our housebound patients. So that was one of the easier ones to do, actually.
Thank you, and that's really encouraging to hear, Anwar, because I know that was a real concern. So just thank you everybody for dropping in your questions so far. We've only got 15 minutes left, so thanks for all the questions that have been submitted so far. There might be a bit of time for any more that come through. I've got another one for you actually, Anwar. It's are you encouraging people to talk to their doctors about concerns with so much pressure on the NHS? Is it recommended for people to speak to their GP?
So if you've received an invitation letter from the NHS or from one of our vaccine centres or your GP, and you have concerns and questions, then of course, speak to your GP or practice nurse. If you haven't, then I would advise not to until you do so, because basically it would be difficult for us to cope. However, if you have a very, a burning issue and you're having a consultation with your GP, then do, pop in the question about vaccines. But whilst I've got the opportunity, I'd like to add something here. The most important thing, it doesn't matter if you've had your first and second jab. I think what you have to look back to the 1968 and the 1918 swine flu pandemic. They didn't have vaccines. They didn't have steroids. They had no antibiotics. What they had were just simple public health measures, which was washing hands with very basic soap, wearing a face mask, and socially distancing. And it took them 2 years to come out of the pandemic. So until you get advice from the government or Public Health England, please, whether you're vaccinated or not, you must maintain social distancing, wearing your face mask and washing your hands, because that is the only way, together with the vaccine, that we can end this horrible pandemic and get back to normality.
Thank you, Anwar. A rallying cry and some public health history as well, which were always really helpful, I think, to remind ourselves where we fit. Which links me into a question that's just come in for Kevin. Is the COVID vaccine a one-off, or will it be done yearly?
Well, we've got used to getting our annual flu vaccines now for many years to help to reduce the risk of new strains of flu that circulate every year. And in a similar way, we anticipate that various strains of the coronavirus may well provide challenge to the vaccine. Now, this is something we will continue to keep under very, very close review. But I suspect, given what we understand now about new strains and new variants of coronavirus, I would fully anticipate that as we approach the autumn and the vaccine manufacturers sort of amend and change their vaccine preparations to tackle all the strains which are currently circulating, that we may well encourage a repeat vaccinations. So remember, we shouldn't lose sight of the goal here, right? We have been in this global pandemic that has resulted in significant loss of life. It has shut down our economy for months. Many local communities are affected by this. Moving out of this and getting out of this pandemic and getting back to some normalcy is going to require all of us to both make sacrifices, but also to stand up and protect ourselves and our communities when that time comes. And I think vaccination is a part of that. Taking hands, face, space is also part of that as well. So we all have to do our bit to ensure we get through this.
Thank you, Kevin. Now I think this is really is the final question, unless I get another alert. So this is a question just come in. I'm concerned as at-risk person, I have not received a letter I should have inviting me to get the vaccine. How can I inquire? Somen.
So I think that there's two issues there. I'll just raise this. It might not apply in this case, but there are some people who may not be registered with general practice, and they may not receive an invite. So that's an issue of concern. And so if that is the case, please do call our helpline and we can help you. We can register you and we can make sure you get vaccinated. So that's one issue. And then the other question is, obviously, if you are registered with a GP, you think you fall within the categories, you have an underlying health condition, for instance, or you're an at-risk group, and you haven't received an invite, then yeah, please contact your general practitioner. If there's a problem, contact our helpline, because yeah, it's important that you get vaccinated.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for listening in. We hope you found it useful. Thank you so much to Dr. Kevin Fenton, Dr. Anwar Ali, our own Dr. Somen Banerjee from Tower Hamlets Public Health, and our own Mayor John Biggs. And this is just the start of a series of events, and every Tuesday we have our COVID champions. So this is a key way that we keep in touch with the community, and it would be really great if you found this a useful evening, then please do sign up to become one of our Tower Hamlets COVID champions. And of course, such an important message that's come through. If you've had the vaccine, please talk to your friends and family. If everybody talks to their friends and family about being confident with the vaccine, then we can encourage more take up. So I just want to say thank you again for everybody for taking part. I'm sure we'll be able to put the video up somehow so we can listen in, but this is the first of the series, and please do keep in touch. Thank you very much. Good evening.